All right, everybody, welcome to the steps to a successful i502 build out from i502 Rehab. We're going to go through a timeline of events and show you what it takes to have a successful i502 producer processing facility. And it all starts with your planning. We're talking about getting good blueprints and drawings and having a facility master planned that goes over all the different aspects of gardening in an indoor environment. And if you do these right, you're going to be pretty much guaranteed a successful future because your facility is going to be streamlined for indoor gardening, which is what we're in the business of here. So basically, here's the blueprint. Everyone's familiar with these because you're already licensed. You just want to plan for where your production is going to take place and try to streamline that so it's going to cut down on your labor costs. And while you're planning, it's a good idea to plan for how your growing is going to take place. Indoor gardening produces a lot of heat and humidity inside of your growing spaces. So how you deal with that while giving your plants what they want and need to thrive is very important here. So this is basically a scheme that we came up with for adjustable, vented, cooled ballast. So the first thing is electrical. Obviously, your facility needs at least 220, and to work best, you're looking at needing three-phase power. So plan ahead. Plan for the max load of your future build out. So if you're shooting for your 7,000 square foot canopy limit, look at having the electrical capacity to deal with that load, not just the load that you're dealing with currently, where you're not at your maximum canopy. And get an electrician who's able to professionally design and install this type of facility. It's not like a normal electrical build out. So here we're looking at a master planned electrical scheme where we have services for all the future needs of this building, and they're professionally installed. We have ballasts outside of the grow rooms to keep the heat signature out of the room, and just a real tidy, clean, professional look. And the inspectors love it when they see that. They know that you're serious about the business. And keep those guys happy, they'll stay off your case. Nothing to worry about there. So here we're looking at, again, all ballast outside of the room, professional, future-proof electrical installation. And when you're inside of that room, those lights, you know, there's not a mess of wires. And it allows you to really seal in that room and have a completely controlled environment for those cannabis plants. So here we're talking about lighting, planning for the different styles of lights that are going to be needed for your indoor garden. And obviously some exciting stuff has happened in the area of indoor gardening as far as the lights are concerned. So you have high output, low operating cost ballast and light solutions on the market. And just you want to plan for the different kinds of lights that are needed for the different stages of growth. And just have a plan going forward so that when you're building out your room or you're upgrading your facility, you're not going to have to play around with the lighting. Once it's installed, you shouldn't have to touch it except to change out your bulbs or troubleshoot the occasional problem. And of course, light is your biggest source of heat, so you're going to plan accordingly to deal with that heat. So here we're just going to look at an adjustable system that has the max lumen output with the minimum heat signature. And in this particular install, these lights are fully adjustable so that you can give the cannabis plants just the amount of light that they need. And they're easy to access the lights when they need changed out. These are end-to-end ballasts or end-to-end bulbs. And they're completely heat vented, as you can see. Now, climate control is probably more important than any other aspect of your planning. Climate control, and namely your cooling, that's the lifeblood of any indoor growing facility. If your temperatures get out of control, your plants are going to get stressed, your quality is going to diminish, your weight's going to diminish, you're going to introduce pests and pathogens. Bad news. So you want to make sure you're planning and have a good system of air conditioning to take care of your plants and keep the temperature where it needs to be. So your cooling actually covers 5 different aspects: temperature, humidity, airborne pathogen control, the room airflow, and if you do it right, good CO2 enrichment schemes that you can put into place and really see some exciting results. So here we're talking about some high efficiency units. These are 5-ton commercial units, and they're installed so that they're doing the maximum amount of cooling in that room. And of course, these are fully adjustable from right outside of the room. That's where the controls are located, and you can set and forget and be assured that the temperature ranges are staying optimal even with all the lights turned on. And so dehumidification is something that's very important. You're putting so much water on these cannabis plants because they're just a thirsty kind of a plant. If you're not able to take some of that humidity out of the room, you're going to be introducing powdery mildew, and just you're going to have a lot of problems. So dehumidification is something that every indoor garden needs to have in place, and it doesn't cost a lot to do it. Ambient airflow and recirculating. You know, if you're doing an indoor garden, the air has to move around to mimic nature, so you're going to need a lot of wall mount fans, and you're going to want to have that air moving around. So what we're looking at here, this is one of the veg rooms where we have our 5-ton AC unit. All the venting is up on the ceiling there. There's plenty of outlets to move that cool air throughout the room in an even manner. And then we have a lot of oscillating wall fans. And if you seal up your room properly, which we'll show you, and then you can introduce CO2, do it professionally. You're not going to be spending a lot on CO2 because your room's not leaking CO2. And if you plan ahead of time, you can do some really awesome stuff with your CO2. Here we're basically looking at a cheap CO2 burner unit. Runs off of natural gas or propane. It's introducing that CO2 right into the intake of our AC unit, dispersing that evenly throughout the entire grow room. And I tell you what, cannabis plants love it when you can give them extra CO2. You can expect to see at least a 30% increase in your yields. 30%, that's huge. So here we go, a fully sealed room. This still has to deal with planning for your climate control. And this is what a good fully sealed room should look like. We're taking into account all the different ways that air can escape. It's going to keep your CO2 in there. It's going to keep your temperature able to be controlled, fine-tuned, and it also lets that CO2, not escape. And really, if you do this properly, by the time you're introducing those cannabis plants, they're going to love you. Now, planning for water, the style of your operation can go from simple to elaborate. We did this on a budget here. So what we're dealing with is manual watering. Now, testing your water for known contaminants, everyone should have done that already. It costs about $100 at the lab. It's going to give you a baseline for what kind of treatment you need. And then that treatment is going to help your nutrients realize their full potential. So consider dealing with treating that water, getting the parts per million down to a manageable level. And then also just consider your wastewater and how you're going to be dealing with that long term for the facility. So treatment options, almost a foolproof way is to have a sediment and a reverse osmosis. You pre-filter the sediment, and then that goes into a reverse osmosis. You're left with the most pristine, workable water, and a lot of the nutrients are designed with reverse osmosis being, what they're expecting the grower to be using. So this is a simple water system we installed. Now, planning for your workflow, this goes back to your master plan. If your facility processes also, consider how that can take place within the constraints of the building. You want to plan the layout of the rooms for the future workflows in the garden. So your clones are going into veg, which are going into flower, which are then going into dry, which are going to process. Are those rooms placed in a logical order so that that's not taking a lot of time to move those plants when they're going through their different life cycles? So here we're looking at, we utilize some space on top of these flower rooms for the processing. And it's just a real clean and logical way for the cannabis to travel through the facility, cut down on your cost. Of course, you're going to have to plan for your security and the other i502 guidelines. Not much of a surprise here. i502 laws have to be adhered to. So you're going to plan for all the different aspects of the operation needed to run like a business the way that the state tells you. And it's a good idea to have a computer proficient person on hand who can do that daily, the dance of the data entry. So it's a daily task. Make sure you got a computer guy on hand to, keep you in compliance, basically. Here we'll just show you some security. Basically, we have a safe, we have all the scales and all the computer racks in a secure room. And, here we have 32 camera surveillance system. Again, it's mandated by the state, so most likely everyone's going to have that in place already. If you have a facility where you have room to do future build out, try to plan for that ahead of time, because as you start to operate and bring in cash flow, if you're able to invest that into doing future build out, you're going to be ahead of the competition. So here we're just showing how this facility had all their concrete and framing and insulation done, planning for the future build out to get up to their 7,000 square foot canopy limit. So industry experience and expertise, that's what i502 Rehab is about. These practices go beyond just building out a good facility. We're talking decades of top-notch experience that are put into practice. Indoor gardening is not an easy business to be in, and there's lots of stuff to consider. We can bring top yields from having the top genetics, best quality, disease-resistant, quicker turnaround times on your harvest. There's different techniques for growing different strains. We can elaborate on that. And there's just a lot of tricks of the trade, as you might imagine, all the way from cloning, growing, budding, curing it, getting the best smell and aroma, and just giving people what they want at the retail end. And if you pull this off right, you're going to have nothing but healthy plants and genetics. So by the time we introduced cannabis into this facility, they were just loving it. I mean, they've never been so happy and healthy. So here we're just basically looking at that canopy just going crazy in the veg room. And this is a system of growing that produces healthy crops sustainably all the way out into the future. We're talking lower operating costs because of those streamlined workflows, putting in the effort to plan ahead of time, and just great quality. All right, so let's talk about results. What we're looking at here is after we introduce the cannabis into this facility, we're looking at about 3 weeks into a flower on the left here, and then we're looking at the veg room where we had about 140 other plants that were going to be flowered on that other side of the veg room. And it's all about results here. This facility was built out so that these plants had the ideal environment, and they're going to produce the maximum amount of yields. So let's go ahead and have a tour of this facility here, and we can show you what we're talking about. And this facility was done on a budget. So, all the important stuff is in place, but if you have a little more money to spend, you can fine tune it so that you're going to have even bigger crops just by investing into the plan of your facility. And it's going to keep you future proof for the long term, because the goal here is to have a facility that's going to produce good crops for decades into the future. So this room here is just about 1/3 of the entire veg space. That wall on the end is a temporary wall, and this room is just nothing but genetics. This facility probably had at least 80 genetics in it, and the goal was to keep all these healthy while the decision was made as to what strains were going to be grown, for the future of the building. Obviously, having 80 different strains wasn't going to be the way to go, so we let these things grow out and had a good idea of which ones we wanted to use. So there's our main nutrient and watering station. Again, all the ballasts on the outside of the rooms. And this is the second half of that main veg room. Now this was converted over to be able to have set up for flowering. And so what you're looking at is probably 140 to 160 plants, about 8 different strains, and they were just entering into a flowering stage of their life. So they're all fully vegged out, and they're happy, healthy plants. There's our 5-ton AC unit for this half of the room. And you can see that this room extended about 50 feet down This is just showing how it's important to have a quarantine room. If you're suspecting any kind of pest or pathogen, you want to have a separate room to get those plants quarantined into. And that's what we're showing you here. You don't want to run the risk of exposing the facility. Here we're looking at flowering about 3 weeks in, and just want to show you how in this install there was side-by-side flowering rooms. So this particular room, the lights were off, and on this side we're seeing that lights are on. Real nice setup. So here we'll hear a little bit more.
Orange Kush, Dutch Tree, and Blue Dream that we've brought in from all over the state. Some of them created by our own hands. Blue Dream and Orange Kush. I think there's around 120 of just those two strains. And there are the other plants that are in that same room as the Orange Kush and Blue Dream. And I believe there is 6 strains in here flowering in those size plants. White Widows, Alaskan Thunderfucks, Chem Dogs, I don't know.
And this is what we're looking at about, I'd say about 6 to 7 weeks into the process.
Oh, it's going to be so monstrous.
So again, these guys were having no issues whatsoever. They were just loving life in this facility. And you know, that's the way it should be. All right, so that's exciting. So what's there to do next? You know, it's just all about having a good, healthy crop and being able to do that again and again into the future. And these plants that you just got done seeing there, they were budded until they were fully mature. We prepared them to harvest, and we do that based on the kind of harvested plant that people like to buy. There's certain ways to do it, and after they're kind of prepared on the stalk, we cut them down, hang them to dry, and we give them a good proper time to cure. And again, that has to do with climate control. There's certain ways that you want to have that climate control to give them a good cure, to maintain that aroma, and to keep all the crystals in place there, so that by the time it's processed and put out for sale at retail, they're flying off the shelves. And as the i502 scene here changes, you're going to want to change with it, and that means changing the way that your operation is growing and the type of cannabis that you're growing. There's some really exciting changes on the horizon that could mean some really big profits for those producers and processors who manage to stay ahead of the curve here. And that's really what we're about at i502 Rehab. If you don't know already, we're talking first off about a possible removal of that tax burden that you have to pay on the Liquor Control Board, 25% tax. And also there's new possible legislation that could mandate that all these medical retail facilities may have to buy their product from established i502 growers. So if you're able to stay ahead of the curve and we can show you how to do that, you're going to have the opportunity to make some really good profits moving forward, which is a real good thing as a producer processor. That's what we're in the business of doing here. So thanks for taking the time to watch this video. And again, i502 Rehab will be in touch.